Hello students, and welcome to the French and Indian War History 0195 online. My name is Dr. Brian Fenchak and I will be your instructor for this course. Before I delve into the particulars of the course, allow me a few moments to tell you a bit about myself. I am a practicing veterinarian in Evansburg, and I recently joined the staff at St. Francis as an adjunct instructor in military history. My academic background includes bachelor degrees in English, Russian, and biochemistry from the Pennsylvania State University, a veterinary medical doctorate degree from the University of Pennsylvania, and a master's in military history from Norwich University. I also served as a naval intelligence officer for 8 years in the Washington, D.C. area, and I currently serve as a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army Reserve. Before I changed careers and attended veterinary school, I was a military analyst for the Central Intelligence Agency. So you may ask, why should I have any interest in the French and Indian War? Well, the war was one of the most crucial conflicts that decided what nation would become the dominant colonial power on the North American continent, and was part of the last great dynastic war of the modern European era, also known as the 7 Years' War. What were the dynastic wars, you may ask? Dynastic warfare was a form of conflict waged by the great European dynastic states following the end of the Middle Ages until the ascent of Napoleon Bonaparte to power in France. It reached its apogee during the reign of Louis XIV of France, and it was characterized by conflicts between the great royal houses of Europe, often due to disagreements over succession rights upon the death of a monarch. These wars were fought by and for the aggrandizement of kings by standing armies of long-service professional soldiers. These wars rarely involved the populations of the countries involved, and most civilians took little personal interest in their resolution, as most were not particularly affected by their outcomes. This was all before the rise of Napoleon, and the mobilization of the entire nation's resources, both human and material, became the new norm of fighting. Napoleon's rise also witnessed the nascent concept of nationalism, whereby the citizens of the various European states increasingly saw themselves within the context of a distinctly German, French, Dutch, Russian, or English national identity. The French and Indian War was but a part of a much larger European conflict, the 7 Years' War, which raged from 1756 to 1763. The war involved an alliance between England and Prussia on one side, and various coalitions including France, Russia, Sweden, Saxony, and the Habsburg empires. This war, and not World War I, was the first truly world war, as it involved most of the major European powers and played out not only in North America, but all across Europe, the Indian subcontinent, the Caribbean, and upon the world's oceans. We will be focusing on the American portion of this war. However, there will be some discussions and assignments early in the course which will attempt to provide you with some background on the 7 Years' War, as its resolution played a key role in how the French and Indian War was fought. Many of the European world's most prominent royal personalities played pivotal roles in the fighting. George II and George III of Great Britain, Louis XV of France, Empress Maria Theresa of the Habsburg Empire, Frederick the Great of Prussia, and finally Empress Elizabeth of Russia. Battles won and lost in Europe and India would help determine the course of the war, but ultimately the fate of North America would be determined by the struggle between England and France. On a more personal level, many of the most significant sites from the French and Indian War are located within a short distance of this campus. The first clashes of the war, involving a young militia officer from Virginia named George Washington, occurred at Jumonville Glen and Fort Necessity, and led to increasingly open conflict between France and Great Britain and her colonies. The bloody encounter between British and French soldiers at Jumonville Glen was George Washington's first baptism of fire, and it was the event that set the world stage for the 7 Years' War. The Bushy Run battlefield, located a short distance from Loretto, was one of the first encounters between British and colonial forces and Native American tribes with their French allies. The French built a small fort at what was called Fort Duquesne shortly before the start of the French and Indian War. It enabled the French to control the forks of the Ohio, and hence the Ohio country, and the struggle to control this area, Fort Duquesne, became pivotal early in the war. It's hard to imagine now, but the area now known as Pittsburgh was once at the farthest reaches of civilization in North America, and was but an outpost on the way into the Ohio country. Some of you may have visited Fort Ligonier. Fort Ligonier was one of the most important forts used by the British forces for their campaigns further into western Pennsylvania, particularly against Fort Duquesne. The two most important military roads of the period, Braddock's Road and Forbes Road, traced their paths through our very backyards and served as conduits for British troops on campaign into the French-held territory in western Pennsylvania. We are fortunate to have so much of the rich history of this conflict so close at hand. One can still visit these historical sites, most of them remaining much as they were more than 250 years ago. Now on to some administrative details. This is a relatively short course, and it would be impossible and unwise to attempt a comprehensive survey of European military conflicts in the mid-18th century. My goal is to provide you with a solid working knowledge of how this war played out in America, particularly in Pennsylvania, as well as familiarizing you with the last great European dynastic war, also known as the 7 Years' War. We will have weekly graded discussions. Your contribution to these is important. Historians learn by analyzing and debating the historical record, and I hope and expect that you will dive right in and let your views be known. You are not expected or encouraged to simply agree with your fellow classmates. Please be willing to disagree if you have a contrary opinion, but be prepared to defend your views with facts and analysis. This is part of the historical process. There will be a few short quizzes and a midterm and final exam. The quizzes will be multiple choice, and the midterm and final exams will be essays. I want to see how you can interpret and analyze historical events and present cogent arguments in defense of your opinions. I am not interested in how quickly you can look up information in your texts or utilize Google. I will do my utmost to make this course interesting for you. I know that most of you are not history majors or even liberal arts students, but a well-rounded education should include an understanding of the salient points of our history, and above all, history can be fun. Welcome aboard, and good luck to all of you.